Be honest, how organized is your workshop right now? If you're like me, you know it should be better. But actually fixing it, it always feels like a massive time sink. Between projects, deadlines, and just wanting to build something, shop organization always gets pushed to I'll do it later. And the big question is, how much time is actually worth spending? Today, I'm putting this to the test. I'm building 3 functional storage solutions, one in 5 minutes, one in 5 hours, and one in 5 days. This is to find out how much time you actually need to spend before shop organization stops being worth it. And the 5-day build, if I can pull it off, could be a total game changer for my small shop organization. And if nothing else, this should at least get interesting. This video's project partner is the Woodworkers Guild of America. More on them later. Alright, first up, the 5-minute challenge. The project itself is a super simple magnetic tool holder for a French cleat wall. The idea is straightforward. A small wooden block with 2 grooves for magnetic strips mounted on a French cleat, so we can quickly grab some small tools like screwdriver squares or bits. It's one of those projects that looks like it should take no more than 5 minutes. So I prepared as much as I possibly could beforehand. I had scrap plywood ready for the French cleats and the dado stack already stacked to the right height. And when the timer starts, for a moment it actually looks promising. But then we hit the real problem. This design needs 2 dado grooves for my magnetic strips so that they can sit flush with the wood. And that means one thing, switching the table saw to a dado stack. Well, if you have ever done that, you already know the issue. And suddenly, the challenge isn't building the project anymore. It's changing over the blade fast enough to the dado stack. At that point, the clock is basically laughing at me. I didn't just try once. You can see my tries on the bottom corner. I'm not gonna make you watch every single thing 5 times, but let's say that I really wanted to beat the clock. And turns out 5 minutes goes very fast. My God. 35 seconds. What is it? I don't care. This counts. It didn't go as fast. I don't care, I give up, that's it, I couldn't do it. I did it 5 times now, I couldn't do it. Okay, this was just stupid. Don't try this at home, it works. Yeah, okay, it's peeling off already because I peeled it off 15 times. But it's a storage thing. And if you build it, you probably need 10 minutes instead of 5. That was just brutal. Okay, as you can see, I tried this many times now. This is the closest I got where I could almost hang it. Take your time when you do that. It's just stupid. Stupid, stupid, stupid. So now, before we move on to the next project, I need to tell you something that is kind of insane. The Woodworkers Guild of America watched one of my videos and basically said, mate, we like your stuff and we reckon your people would like us too. So they sent me a special link for you guys. And get this, the first 1,000 people watching this video to use the link in my description will get a full year of premium membership to the Woodworkers Guild of America for only $149. If you haven't heard of the Woodworkers Guild of America, it's basically an incredible online resource for woodworking instruction or ideas. They've got step-by-step videos on things like joinery, finishing, jigs, sharpening, shop setups, and heaps more. And it's taught by proper instructors who actually explain things clearly. They're always adding new premium videos too, so there's always something fresh to learn. So if you're like me and you like learning in a structured way from sources you can actually trust, check out the link below or scan the QR code on the screen. Big thanks to the Woodworkers Guild of America to being the project partner on this build. Alright, we move on to the 5-hour project. And if you talk about organizing drawers, there's one system you just can't get around. Gridfinity. Now, before you click away and say, oh great, he's gonna just print out a ton of bins and throw them into a drawer, not quite. Because the moment I started thinking about this project, one question popped in my head. Is there a faster and cheaper way to do this? Because the normal Gridfinity workflow is very simple. You download a model, slice it, hit print, and a couple of hours later you have a bin. But the problem is when you have a lot of drawers, that time adds up very fast. You're suddenly printing for days just to organize your workshop. So instead of printing everything, I started thinking, what if we used the laser cutter instead? And instead of plastics, we used cheap MDF. Now, if you don't know what Gridfinity is, here is the quick explanation. Gridfinity is a modular organization system designed by Zach Friedman. Everything is based around a grid and different storage boxes snap into the grid. The big advantage is flexibility. You can mix and match boxes, rearrange them, stack them, and design completely custom bins for your specific tools or parts. And because the system is open source, thousands of different designs already exist online. There's also a bit of history, drama behind it. Before Gridfinity became popular, Alex Chappell, he had already developed a grid-based organizational system for his own workshop. His system used a very similar idea, a base grid with modular boxes, designed specifically to keep tools organized and repeatable. Zach Friedman, the cyborg, later built on that concept and turned it what we know now as Gridfinity. So you could say Zach didn't invent the idea of a modular grid system from scratch. He took inspiration from Alex's system. Now this is where the discussion always starts. When ideas evolve like this, where's the line between copying and inspiration? Personally, I think that's just how innovation works. People building on ideas that came before them, to a degree, obviously. But I'm curious what you think. Maybe let me know in the comments. Of course, the first version I did didn't work properly. The very first grid I cut had a border that was way too big around the whole grid. That one was completely on me. But the bigger problem was that the base plate didn't align properly with each other. They just sat next to each other and you kind of had to eyeball it to align it, which meant every time you moved something, the whole grid could shift slightly. So the first improvement I made was to redesign the base plates so they interlock with each other. Now the plates actually snap together and align automatically. That already made the system feel a lot more solid. The next challenge were the boxes themselves. Each Gridfinity box needs base squares on the bottom to lock into the grid. The awesome part here is that those base squares actually come directly from the grid plate itself. When the laser cuts the grid, the little boxes that drop out become the base squares for the boxes. So we are basically reusing the wasted material, which is pretty nice and should also keep the cost down. The problem was the tolerances. Everything was extremely tight. To fix that, I sanded a small chamfer on all the squares. This took a little bit, but I did that while the laser was cutting parts. This was really important. I didn't have a lot of time in between because my Omtech CO2 laser was super fast in cutting parts. This thing actually is a game changer. I had some diode lasers beforehand, but this Omtech CO2, so fast, so accurate. Doing the chamfers though was really important. It made it much easier to drop the boxes in and out of the grid. But the biggest challenge there was actually the alignment. The problem is these base squares have to be aligned perfectly with the box. If they are even slightly off, the boxes won't sit properly in the grid and the whole grid system doesn't work anymore. So I made a small alignment jig for that. That jig holds the base squares in the correct position while I align the boxes with the fence and glue it on with CA glue. That way everything stays perfectly centered and square while the glue sets. You still have to wait about 30 seconds for the glue to grab, but the jig makes the process much faster. Once you have done a couple of boxes, you then can use the grid in the drawer and align the boxes to the previous boxes that you have put in already. This makes the process even faster because you don't have to wait until the jig is free for the next box to be put in. Just leave the boxes in the grid for now until the glue sets. Now the big question was, does it actually work with a real Gridfinity? So I printed an entire drawer of standard Gridfinity boxes. Please ignore the print quality. One of my printers desperately needs a nozzle change and the prints came out a little wonky, but they are good enough for me and the result is actually pretty great. The 3D printed boxes fit perfectly in the laser cut grid, which means the systems are actually fully compatible with each other. I didn't expect anything else. Now let's talk about speed, because this is where things get a little interesting. Printing that one drawer of bins took about 24 hours of printing time, and that was with 2 printers running, my Bumblelab A1 and my A1 Mini. The laser version? Well, cutting the entire drawer worth of parts took roughly an hour. Each box takes about 2 to 3 minutes to cut. Purely from machine time perspective, the laser is much faster. But there's a huge catch. With the 3D printer, you just press and walk away. With the laser version, you still have to assemble the box and align everything. So there's definitely more hands-on work involved. How much? I will get to that in a second. Then there's the cost, obviously. The fully printed version, just the bins for one drawer, almost used 30 kangaroos worth of filament. The MDF version used 2 sheets of 3mm MDF, which cost me about 13 kangaroos each, so about 26 kangaroos total, wow, including the grid. And that actually produced boxes for 2 drawers and base plates for free. And I did have some failures we're not gonna talk about. So if you have a lot of drawers to organize, the MDF version can save quite a bit of money. It actually is almost half to the filament version. Now, let's get back to how much time it actually took. The challenge here was for 5 hours. And within those 5 hours, including all the trial and error, I managed to make 2 full drawers and 2 smaller ones. The printed version required less than an hour of actual work. Just slicing the files, loading the printers, restarting the print and collecting the parts. But the real time was over several days. A lot of times the printer finished in the middle of the night, so I had to collect the parts hours later. So depending on how you measure time, both systems have their advantages. Now, if you want to try this yourself, I created a free download with everything you need. It includes about 55 pre-generated boxes, the laser grid plates that I used in my drawers, and the alignment jig. I will also make an unlisted video showing exactly how to generate your grids inside Lightburn. Depending on when you watch this video, this might not be done yet. But if you want to download the pack, I will send out an updated email to everyone once it is online. After using both systems, I think there are really 2 clear outcomes. The most practical and convenient solution is probably a mixed version. Use the laser cut MDF grid as the base for the drawers and then use 3D printed bins. The printed bins slide smoother, stack better, and there are already tons of designs out there for your specific tools and parts if you are into super organization. When it comes to the price, the MDF version wins by far. The laser cut system costs roughly half as much, and that difference adds up really quickly if you want to implement that into all your drawers in your workshop. So if there's one takeaway from this, stop printing base plates for drawers. They are just not worth it. Cut the grids from MDF, save the money, and then print the bins you actually need. Now for the 5-day challenge. My biggest frustration in this shop has always been offcut storage and all the long tools and jigs I've built over the years. My massive router sled I built a while back, the long linear guide rails alone are 2.20 meters high, about 7.5 feet. And right now, they are just basically leaning against walls, stacked in some corners or buried behind some stuff. Which means every time I need something, I end up digging through a big pile of stuff. So the goal for this project is simple. Take this messy corner of the shop and turn it into something that actually works. The plan is to build a large vertical storage system with 2 main sections. One side will be a proper shelving for timber storage, and the other side will be a huge pull-out pantry style cabinet for all my long stuff. Basically everything that is too long to store anywhere else. The cabinet is going to be about 2.30 meters tall, roughly 7.5 feet high, and about 73 centimeters, roughly 30 inches wide. And we split that in half, which means this thing is basically a giant sliding storage wall. Now, the biggest challenge with builds like this in a small shop like mine is actually having enough space to build them. Because when your shop is already full, building something this big means first, you have to make space to build something that actually creates more space for you. So step 1 is framing out the structure with 2x4s. For most of that, I used my framing nailer, but wherever I couldn't reach, I just used screws and my impact driver instead. Because this whole structure is probably carrying a lot of weight, I also bolted everything to my shed walls directly. While building the frame, I tried to keep everything as square as possible so that we don't have any problems later down the track. Next, we move on to our pull-out drawer cabinet. For this part, I'm using a very cheap 3/4 inch subfloor plywood I had lying around. Honestly, I don't even remember where I got it. I just remember I got it because it was an amazing deal, and it's probably been in my shop for over a year waiting for the right project, and this seemed to be perfect. This is also the moment where it really started to sink in how big this thing actually was going to be. I'm probably not calling it drawer anymore, a sliding storage wall. That's how it's called. On the bottom of the cabinet, I installed 5 heavy-duty casters. This will carry most of the weight. Each caster is rated for 50 kilos. This is way more than I will ever need for this sliding storage wall. They are also one directional, which means they cannot pivot in any other direction than back and forth. This is important. And for the top rail guide system, I found something I don't think I've ever seen used for something like this. Now I cut all the plywood panels to size and then started drilling pocket holes everywhere. About every 10 centimeters, which is 4 inches. Yes, that's probably overkill, but this cabinet will carry a lot of weight. So I wanted to make sure it's super solid. Unfortunately, I only had 2 sheets of the 3/4 inch subfloor ply left. So the main structure is 3/4 inch, but the front and back panels are only going to be 1/2 inch. We'll see later if that turns out to be a little bit of a mistake, but we have to go with that for now. Getting everything aligned during assembly was honestly one of the hardest parts. This is actually that one time those metal right angle clamps came in useful. Trying to hold a giant plywood panel square by yourself is not easy. It's doable, like I've done it, but I would strongly recommend a second person if you're building something like this. Once everything was aligned, I started driving in what felt like 1,000,001 pocket holes. But after that, the cabinet structure was done. Seriously, so many pocket holes. Next step, I mounted the casters to the bottom. After installing those ones, it was time for the real test. Moving this giant cabinet into the frame. Small shop problems again, because there isn't exactly a lot of room to maneuver something this size, but eventually I wrestled it into position and it fit perfectly. And even without the top guide rail system installed yet, it really rolled surprisingly well. Next up was the front panel, which acts like an overlay cabinet door. Its main job is actually to stop the cabinet from sliding too far into the frame and smashing into the wall. When you're working alone, spacers and clamps become your best friend. They hold everything exactly where it needs to be. They are basically another set of hands that you can use, kinda. And yes, more pocket holes. Now it was time to install the top guide rail system. And this is where things get really interesting. Instead of using unistrut rails, which are pretty common solutions for builds like this, I use this Vevor sliding pocket door hardware. This system is designed for sliding pocket doors, but it works perfectly for this application. And the best part, it was about half the price of buying unistruts and all the hardware needed for this project. The Vevor rail itself is rated for about 100 kilograms, 220 pounds, which is more than enough than we need. Because again, the casters are carrying most of the load. The rail only needs to keep the cabinet aligned and stable. The hardware also happens to be exactly the thickness of a 2x4. Which means installing it was super simple. I just mounted it to a 2x4 that is longer than the opening, then screw the 2x4 to the top of the frame, then install the sliding rollers on the cabinet. Voila, everything done. And once everything was installed, the cabinet moved butter smooth. At this point, the giant sliding cabinet wall was working exactly how I imagined. So the next step was finishing the timber storage shelves. And again, we're using pocket holes for this. Lots of them. The shelves will store horizontal boards. And on the bottom, there will be eventually 2 off-cut bins, one for hardwood, one for softwood. Those bins aren't finished yet because I ran out of materials, but I left the space for them there. Once the shelves were installed, I could finally start moving things into their new homes. I made a ton of custom holders for my clamps, the router sleds, and all the other weird oversized tools that never had a proper place before. This is where my 3D printers came in super handy again. To clean up the look of the whole system, I covered the frame with 6mm MDF, so when the cabinet is closed, you don't have to stare at the chaos behind it. And let's be honest, at one stage there's gonna be chaos. And after less than 5 days of building, this thing is finally done. And honestly, this project was insane. But it completely transformed this part of my workshop. Everything finally has a proper place. The long tools are easy to access. The timber storage actually works finally, and I gained a huge amount of usable shop space again. And for my workshop, this is a game changer. Now, if you like plans for this system, let me know. Just drop a comment below and say plan. And if enough people are interested, I'll get proper plans drawn up for you guys. Now that's it. Don't do the 5-minute challenge. It's just stupid. Check out the free files in the description. And if you like this shop improvement, check out this video next, where I built a full panel saw that actually fits in a small workshop. As always, I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.